It was the year 1362, and the wide, open plains of what is now Ukraine became the stage for a confrontation that would determine the balance of power in Eastern Europe. Two armies faced each other, nearly equal in numbers and armed with the same deadly tools. Both sides relied on composite bows, fast and precise archers, and decades of military experience. On paper, the battle promised to be evenly matched, yet the outcome defied expectation. One side, through strategic brilliance, turned similar weapons and tactics into overwhelming superiority. The other side was left helpless, unable to respond effectively to the force arrayed against them. This was the Battle of Blue Waters, a long-forgotten clash that would reshape borders and influence empires for generations. The question at the heart of it all is simple. How did one side dominate despite seemingly identical capabilities? What decisions, strategies, and innovations led to this decisive victory? Welcome to Great History, a place where we look beyond the surface of battles to reveal the choices and moments that change empires, uncovering stories of courage, strategy, and ingenuity. The stage was set, and the actors were ready. In April of 1362, Lithuania was under pressure, yet poised for action. The Teutonic Knights were on a campaign of expansion, their siege engines and heavily armored infantry having just captured Kaunas, a key fortress in the western reaches of Lithuania. Watching from nearby hills were Grand Duke Algiras, son of Gaminas, and his brother Kanstas, arriving too late to prevent the fortress from falling. Their hopes for a last-minute miracle, a desperate counterattack that could turn the tide, were quickly dashed. From their vantage point, they saw smoke rising from the ruined walls, banners torn and fluttering in the wind, and the sounds of looting echoing across the countryside. The fall of Kaunas was a clear reminder that defending Lithuania's western borders alone would not be enough to secure the duchy. Simply holding territory was insufficient. Survival and growth required careful strategy, resources, and calculated action. War was not only about protection, it was about expansion and advantage. The disjointed principalities to the east, nominally under Mongol rule, presented an enticing opportunity. The Mongol Golden Horde, which theoretically controlled the region, was weakened by internal strife following the death of Khan Berdi Beg in 1359. This event triggered a period historians now call the Great Troubles, a 20-year fragmentation of power within the horde. The empire no longer functioned as a unified entity. Instead, it splintered into multiple centers of influence. Kelebeg struggled to maintain authority over Sarai, Bulat Timur held sway in the region near Volga, Bulgaria, and Abdullah asserted control over Crimea. Each faction was focused on its own ambitions, leaving the northern borders and Lithuanian movements largely unobserved. For Grand Duke Algiras, this represented a rare and opportune moment. With the Mongols distracted by internal rivalries, he could advance into the southern Russian principalities, territories formerly under the Crimean Ulus led by the powerful warlord Mamai. Mamai, preoccupied with power struggles over Sarai, lacked the resources to counter a Lithuanian advance. Algiras moved quickly, capitalizing on the limited resistance he faced. Cities and towns including Shera, Bryansk, Novgorod, Severki, Statub, and Piraeus fell under his control without major battles. This expansion resembled a methodical administrative takeover more than a series of bloody conflicts, though the implicit threat of force ensured compliance. Territories were absorbed into the Grand Duchy with careful management, akin to a conqueror collecting trophies, each new region a step toward regional dominance. Securing the southern lands, Algiras turned his attention toward Kiev, a city that was not only a strategic target but also carried enormous symbolic weight. Though its former influence as the heart of Rus had waned, controlling Kiev meant asserting legitimacy and power, signaling to the wider world that Lithuania was no longer merely a northern duchy under threat. Such a move carried risk. Challenging the Golden Horde directly was equivalent to provoking a powerful and vengeful adversary. Nevertheless, Algiras pressed forward. He delegated authority of the newly acquired lands to his family, entrusting his brother Korotas and his nephews with the task of administering these territories. Local Mongol tax collectors were replaced, and construction efforts began immediately. Fortresses and towns sprang up, solidifying Lithuanian control and creating a lasting infrastructure that would sustain the expansion. Smoot-Rich Castle, situated by the river, and Bakakota Fortress, built on a hill previously inhabited by monks, became enduring symbols of this growth. Even the founding of cities reflected careful planning and opportunity. A story recounts that during a hunting trip, two brothers of the Karajat Tai Chi clan guided a herd of deer onto an island, realizing that the location was ideal for a new settlement. This led to the creation of Kamyts-Podilsky, a city that remains a testament to Lithuania's expansionist vision. Algiers ruled with both strength and diplomacy, allowing Orthodox Christianity, local governance, and Byzantine cultural traditions to continue alongside Lithuanian oversight. This approach fostered loyalty, maintained local customs, and earned Lithuania a reputation as benevolent rulers. Historians have since referred to the Grand Duchy as a Silk Empire, not because of trade but because of the soft power used in governance. Meanwhile, Mamai, upon stabilizing his control in Crimea, returned to find Lithuania comfortably settled in southern Rus. The Mongol warlord's reaction was pragmatic. Rather than engage in immediate conflict, he negotiated a compromise. Lithuania retained control of the new territories while continuing to pay tribute to the Golden Horde. Mamai's fractured empire was ill-prepared for a new military campaign, and having Lithuania as a semi-cooperative neighbor could serve his interests in controlling other rebellious principalities, including Moscow. By the end of these maneuvers, Lithuania had evolved into a regional power. Trade routes from Podolia to the Black Sea were secure. Kiev was firmly under Lithuanian administration, and opportunities for further expansion lay to the south and east. Moscow, observing these developments, recognized a significant emerging rival. Algiers capitalized on this momentum, initiating campaigns between 1368 and 1372, even pressing toward the Kremlin itself. This rapid expansion, careful diplomacy, and integration of diverse territories marked the beginning of a cultural and political transformation, setting the stage for a new era in the region. Ukrainian lands, under Lithuanian influence, moved closer to European models, diverging from Moscow's trajectory. Cities like Kiev were not oppressed. They thrived under a multiracial and multi-ethnic administration, creating lasting foundations for prosperity. Algiers' efforts reshaped the political map, combining military acumen with strategic governance to expand Lithuanian influence across Eastern Europe. By autumn of 1362, Grand Duke Algiers was not wandering aimlessly through forests or along dusty roads. He was advancing with clear intent, crossing the Dnieper River to confront a strategically critical target. This stronghold was known by many names. The Turks referred to it as Jabgu, which roughly meant leader or ruler, while the Rus called it Sin-Devot or Blue Waters. In Lithuanian, it was Melon Gi Vanenis. Despite the confusion over names, all agreed this location would play a decisive role in the region's power dynamics. The battle that would unfold here had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate clash of soldiers. Rivers of a slightly bluish hue were common in the area, yet the exact location of the engagement is widely accepted to be near the Sanuka River, a tributary of the southern Bug that eventually flows into the Black Sea. The site lay neatly between the Dnieper and Dniester rivers, a region that offered strategic advantages for both armies. Unlike Western Europeans, the Lithuanians were not meticulous chroniclers of every royal ceremony or minor battle detail. Their history was recorded more through action than through words, with swords, spears, and strategic movements serving as the primary storytellers. This made reconstructing the Battle of Blue Waters particularly challenging. The accounts that survive, however, provide enough detail to understand the strategies and innovations that shaped the outcome. One important source is the work of Maciej Strakowski, a 16th-century chronicler who, though writing nearly 2 centuries after the fact, offers valuable insight into the conflict. According to Strakowski, the Mongol Tatar forces were not a unified elite army but were instead commanded by 3 regional leaders, Abdallah Kutlug Bey, Hajibey, and a commander named Demetrius. While competent in their own regions, these leaders lacked the centralized structure, coordination, and manpower that characterized a full-scale horde expedition. This fragmentation would prove critical when facing the organized Lithuanian army. The Lithuanian forces numbered between 20,000 and 25,000 men, a significant force by 14th century standards. This army was diverse and well-structured, combining heavy cavalry, infantry, and ranged units. Cavalry units, or boyars, wore a mix of chainmail, scale armor, and hardened leather. While lighter than the plate armor used in Western Europe, it offered substantial protection while allowing mobility. The infantry, armed with swords and spears, formed the backbone of the army, ready to hold ground and engage in close combat. Ranged units ranged from longbow archers to heavy crossbowmen, capable of penetrating even well-armored opponents. These different components were carefully coordinated to create a flexible, mixed arms formation capable of responding to the mobility-focused tactics of the Tatar army. The Tatar forces, in contrast, were smaller and ranged from 10,000 to 20,000 men, depending on the source. Their strength lay in mobility, mounted archers, and the ability to unleash volleys of arrows in rapid succession. Both sides employed similar step-style warfare techniques: speed, mounted archery, and maneuverability. Yet, what seemed like parity on paper concealed subtle but crucial differences in equipment, training, and tactical application. The Tatar army excelled with composite bows, weapons perfected over centuries for mounted combat. These short, powerful bows combined layers of wood, sinew, and horn to store incredible energy and allow arrows to travel at high speed. The Tatars mastered these bows, using them as the foundation of a highly mobile, relentless attack style. Their horses and riders moved in coordinated waves, striking quickly and then retreating before the enemy could respond, a medieval equivalent of blitzkrieg. However, even these formidable weapons had limitations. Composite bows required careful maintenance. Moisture could weaken the materials, reducing power, and excessive firing without rest could diminish performance. Lithuanian bows, while effective, were generally less refined. They lacked some of the critical enhancements that Tatar bows had, such as sharply recurved tips, string bridges, and optimized draw weight. This meant that Lithuanian archers' arrows had slightly less range and penetration, a gap that the Lithuanians had to address through other means. Here, heavy crossbows played a decisive role. Unlike composite bows, crossbows did not rely on speed but on sheer kinetic power. Mechanical aids allowed crossbows to exceed human limits, delivering bolts capable of piercing armor that arrows from lighter bows could not. These weapons allowed the Lithuanians to counter the mobility and firepower of the Tatar cavalry effectively. By combining disciplined infantry, heavily armored cavalry, and strategically deployed crossbowmen, Algiras crafted an army designed not just to resist Tatar tactics but to turn them to his advantage. Formation was also critical. Algiras arranged his troops in a crescent-shaped line, hugging the riverbank, which achieved two key objectives. First, it absorbed the initial volleys of Tatar arrows, allowing soldiers to brace behind shields and maintain cohesion. Second, it countered the Tatars' signature maneuver of flanking and encircling. By creating a curved defensive posture, any attempt at envelopment would funnel the attackers directly into the strongest part of the Lithuanian line, nullifying their mobility advantage. This level of tactical foresight demonstrated Algiras' understanding of both his own army's strengths and the vulnerabilities of his opponent. The crescent formation allowed the Lithuanians to engage the Tatars on terms that favored controlled, close-range combat, where heavy crossbows could be used to devastating effect. As the battle commenced, the Tatars executed their usual tactics. Mounted archers galloped forward, releasing arrows aimed at the Lithuanian flanks. These fast, angled shots were designed to disrupt formations and create openings. However, the Lithuanian troops held firm. Shields locked and spears braced, the soldiers absorbed the initial storm of arrows without breaking formation. The disciplined response frustrated the Tatars, forcing them to abandon their preferred hit-and-run tactics. They had to close in, engaging in direct confrontations with infantry and cavalry, scenarios that they generally sought to avoid. This shift was pivotal. The moment the Tatars were forced into close-range combat, the Lithuanian crossbow units struck. These crossbowmen waited for the optimal moment when the enemy was exposed and committed, unleashing bolts capable of piercing armor and killing both horse and rider. The concentrated fire caused immediate casualties and sent shockwaves through the Tatar ranks. What had begun as a standard mounted archer assault became a direct confrontation under circumstances that heavily favored the Lithuanians. The psychological effect of these volleys was just as significant as the physical damage. The Tatars, renowned for discipline and coordinated maneuvers, faced unexpected losses in a situation that defied their usual operational patterns. Exhaustion from previous conflicts, the pressures of internal political instability, and the sudden, lethal introduction of crossbow fire all contributed to a decline in morale. Once cracks appeared in their formations, disorder spread rapidly. Retreats became chaotic, and the army's cohesion broke down entirely. Leaders fell in battle, leaving the remaining forces without direction or strategy. The chronicler Strakovsky describes this as a rare occurrence, a full-scale disorganized Tatar retreat, a scenario almost unheard of in the steppe warfare tradition. The combination of disciplined formations, innovative weapon use, and strategic positioning had created a decisive advantage, allowing the Lithuanians to exploit weaknesses in an otherwise evenly matched battlefield scenario. The Battle of Blue Waters, thus, serves as a prime example of how careful preparation, superior tactics, and intelligent application of technology can turn the tide in military conflict. Even when opponents possess similar equipment and nominally equivalent numbers, thoughtful strategy and innovation can create decisive outcomes. The Lithuanians understood the limitations of their own weapons, compensated with mechanical innovations like heavy crossbows, and employed formations that neutralized the enemy's traditional strengths. As the Tatars faltered, the Lithuanians pressed their advantage, solidifying a victory that would not only secure newly acquired territories but also elevate the Grand Duchy to a regional power capable of challenging both neighboring states and the remnants of the Golden Horde. As the forces of Lithuania and the Tatars met at Blue Waters, the battlefield itself became a character in the unfolding drama. The crescent-shaped Lithuanian formation stretched along the riverbank, each unit carefully positioned to maximize defense while creating opportunities for counterattack. Spearmen and swordsmen formed the core, while heavy crossbowmen were stationed behind, ready to deliver devastating volleys at precisely the right moment. Cavalry units, lighter than their Western European counterparts but mobile and disciplined, flanked the formation, poised to exploit any opening. On the opposite side, the Tatars approached with characteristic speed and precision. Mounted archers rode in coordinated waves, composite bows drawn tight, sending arrows whistling toward the Lithuanian lines. Their tactics had dominated steppe warfare for centuries. Fast, relentless, and adaptive. Yet today, they would meet a force prepared not just to resist, but to outmatch them in crucial ways. The initial engagement unfolded as expected. Tatars galloped forward, releasing an almost continuous hail of arrows aimed at the flanks and center of the Lithuanian formation. Arrows zipped through the air, striking shields, armor, and horses with lethal intent. The sound was deafening, a mix of whistling projectiles, clashing steel, and the pounding of hooves across the plain. Yet, the Lithuanian soldiers did not waver. Their formation held, disciplined and compact, absorbing the brunt of the Tatar assault. Shields locked, spears angled outward, and heavy armor bore the impact of incoming arrows. Casualties occurred, but the overall cohesion of the Lithuanian line remained intact. This disciplined resistance was the first step in shifting the momentum of the battle. Where the Tatars expected disruption, they found rigidity. Where they sought fear, they encountered resolve. It was at this point that the Lithuanian crossbow units, carefully concealed behind infantry and terrain features, became decisive. Unlike the Tatar composite bows, which relied on speed and rapid firing, heavy crossbows delivered immense kinetic energy capable of penetrating armor and incapacitating mounted soldiers. These bolts were slow compared to arrows, but their power was unmatched. When the Tatars, emboldened by initial success, moved closer to engage the infantry, they unknowingly entered the lethal range of the crossbowmen. Targeted volleys rained down upon exposed riders and horses, tearing through lamellar armor and leaving the Tatar formations vulnerable. Each bolt that struck created both a physical and psychological impact. Soldiers who saw comrades killed instantly lost confidence, and the once feared Tatar cavalry began to hesitate. The combination of discipline, well-placed firepower, and timing had begun to erode the Tatars' advantage. The battle evolved into a series of intense, close-range engagements. Lithuanian spearmen advanced steadily, their shields forming a moving wall as swordsmen followed closely behind to engage any Tatar who breached the front line. The Tatars, trained for mobility and ranged attacks, were forced into hand-to-hand combat, a scenario they typically avoided. Horses collided with shields, spears cracked against armor, and the sound of metal striking metal filled the air. In these direct confrontations, the Lithuanians' preparation paid off. Infantry and cavalry operated as a cohesive unit, supporting each other while exploiting gaps in the Tatar ranks. Crossbowmen continued to fire into the sides and rear of the enemy, maximizing the effect of their heavy bolts. This strategic layering of forces turned the battlefield into a trap for the Tatars, who were unaccustomed to fighting under such disciplined, multi-tiered opposition. As the fight wore on, the Tatars' reliance on traditional steppe tactics became a liability. Feigned retreats, rapid flanking, and constant repositioning, which had made them so effective in previous battles, were neutralized by the crescent formation and coordinated Lithuanian units. Each attempt at maneuver was anticipated and countered. Crossbow fire struck at crucial moments, cavalry blocked escape routes, and infantry held firm, absorbing what should have been decisive Tatar volleys. The result was mounting casualties and rising confusion within the Tatar command. Abdallah Kutlug Bey, Hajibey, and Demetrius struggled to maintain cohesion. Orders were delayed or misinterpreted, and soldiers began to falter under pressure. Where they expected to dictate the rhythm of battle, they found themselves reacting to a well-planned strategy that had anticipated their every move. The psychological aspect of the conflict cannot be overstated. Tatars were legendary for discipline and coordination, able to execute complex maneuvers with precision. Yet at Blue Waters, the combination of fatigue, continuous fire from heavy crossbows, and the unyielding advance of Lithuanian infantry undermined morale. Once the first Tatar units broke and fled, the collapse spread rapidly. The retreat was not organized, it became chaotic, with soldiers abandoning horses, bows, and equipment in a desperate bid to escape the onslaught. Leaders were killed or incapacitated, leaving remaining forces without guidance. Strakovsky's chronicle describes this phase as unprecedented, a disorganized Tatar retreat in the face of Lithuanian discipline and strategy. What had begun as a balanced engagement transformed into a rout, highlighting how preparation and adaptability could overcome numerical and tactical parity. A crucial factor in the Lithuanian victory was the integration of technology with tactical insight. Heavy crossbows, often underestimated in European and steppe warfare, provided a means to directly counter the composite bows and light armor of the Tatars. Whereas arrows could wound or harass, the bolts from these mechanical weapons delivered stopping power capable of turning the tide of engagement. Positioning crossbowmen behind infantry and along natural terrain allowed maximal use of this power. The coordination between heavy infantry, mobile cavalry, and ranged units reflected a sophisticated understanding of combined arms tactics. In contrast, the Tatars' expertise in speed and mobility could not compensate for the controlled environment in which they were forced to operate. Each Lithuanian maneuver was designed to constrain the Tatar strengths while exploiting their weaknesses, demonstrating a level of battlefield engineering that went beyond brute force. By the end of the day, the consequences were clear. The Tatars suffered severe losses, both in manpower and morale. Key leaders were eliminated, remaining units scattered, and the army's capacity to operate effectively in the region was greatly diminished. Lithuania, through a combination of strategic foresight, disciplined formations, and innovative use of heavy crossbows, had turned an evenly matched battle into a decisive triumph. The victory at Blue Waters not only secured newly conquered territories but also established Lithuania as a dominant regional power capable of challenging the remaining Mongol forces and expanding influence over Eastern Europe. The careful balance of preparation, technology, and tactical discipline illustrated how thoughtful planning could convert potential parity into absolute advantage on the battlefield. The Battle of Blue Waters concluded with a decisive Lithuanian victory, leaving the Tatar forces shattered and the region's power dynamics transformed. What had begun as a contest between seemingly equal armies ended in a stark demonstration of how preparation, technology, and tactical insight can turn the tide of war. The Tatars, once feared for their speed, discipline, and mastery of mounted archery, found themselves unable to recover from the disorganized rout. Leaders were dead, formations broken, and soldiers scattered across the plains. The psychological impact was profound. A force accustomed to dictating battles through mobility and rapid volleys now faced the humiliation of retreat and defeat. For the Lithuanians, the result was not only military but also symbolic. The Grand Duchy had asserted itself as a major power in Eastern Europe, capable of challenging Mongol authority and expanding its influence into the formerly contested southern Rus territories. In the immediate aftermath, Grand Duke Algiras acted swiftly to consolidate his gains. Newly acquired cities and towns, including Shara, Bryansk, Novgorod, Severki, Statub, and Piraeus, were organized under trusted family members. His brother Kurotas and nephews were charged with administration, ensuring that Lithuanian control was firm and that local governance continued smoothly. Unlike many conquerors of the era, Algiras chose to integrate rather than oppress. Orthodox Christian traditions, local rulers, and cultural practices were respected. The administration imposed oversight and order, but allowed inhabitants to retain much of their daily life. This strategy not only secured loyalty but also created a reputation for Lithuania as a fair and enlightened ruler. Historians later described the Grand Duchy's governance as akin to a silk empire, emphasizing the smooth, effective, and culturally sensitive exercise of power rather than reliance solely on force. Infrastructure development followed quickly. Fortresses, castles, and towns were constructed to secure borders and provide defensive depth. Smoot-Rich Castle, positioned near the river, and Bakakota Fortress, on a strategic hilltop, became symbols of this expansion. Cities like Kamyts-Podilsky were founded through careful planning, reflecting both practical concerns and opportunities presented by the terrain. This attention to urban planning, military construction, and administrative integration helped cement Lithuanian authority in the region, providing both a defensive buffer and a base for further expansion. The combination of military success and administrative acumen ensured that territories were not merely conquered but incorporated into a functioning, sustainable state structure. The Golden Horde, already weakened by internal conflict, was forced to acknowledge the new reality. Mamai, the Crimean warlord, had returned victorious from consolidating his own position, only to find Lithuania firmly established in southern Rus. Confrontation was risky. The Horde's fractured state made it difficult to project sufficient force against the Lithuanians. A pragmatic negotiation followed. Lithuania was allowed to retain its new territories, provided that tribute payments continued. This agreement reflected a balance of power. Mamai avoided opening a new front while maintaining nominal authority and extracting economic benefit, while Lithuania gained security and recognition for its acquisitions. It was a political compromise that demonstrated the importance of diplomacy alongside military success. The victory at Blue Waters also shifted the broader strategic landscape. Trade routes from Podolia to the Black Sea came under Lithuanian influence, providing both economic benefits and logistical advantages for future campaigns. Kiev, a city of immense symbolic importance, became a centerpiece of Lithuanian administration. Control over Kiev signaled regional dominance and underscored the Grand Duchy's rising status as a power that could challenge both the Mongols and neighboring principalities, including Moscow. Algiras continued to consolidate influence, launching campaigns between 1368 and 1372, reaching as far as the Kremlin. This rapid expansion, combined with political and cultural integration, marked a turning point in Eastern European history. Lithuanian governance began to orient the region more toward Europe, diverging from the trajectory followed by Moscow and its successors. The consequences of the battle extended beyond immediate territorial gains. Militarily, the engagement demonstrated the value of combined arms tactics, disciplined formations, and innovative application of technology. By using heavy crossbows to counter the speed and archery skills of the Tatars, Lithuanian commanders transformed potential disadvantages into decisive advantages. The battle also underscored the importance of strategic foresight, with formations and positioning designed to exploit weaknesses in enemy tactics while protecting the strengths of one's own forces. Psychologically, the rout of a traditionally dominant force reshaped perceptions of power. A previously fragmented army, capable of rapid devastation on the steppe, was neutralized by coordinated planning, discipline, and technological application. Culturally and politically, the expansion solidified the Grand Duchy's reputation. Local populations experienced stability and growth under Lithuanian rule. Administrative reforms, respect for existing religious and cultural practices, and careful integration created a multiracial, multi-ethnic state where cities like Kiev could flourish. The Grand Duchy's approach contrasted with many contemporary conquests, where occupation often meant suppression, forced conversion, or violent displacement. Instead, Lithuania fostered cooperation, preserving local identity while establishing authority. This approach laid the foundation for long-term cultural and political influence in the region, strengthening ties to Europe and creating a lasting legacy. Strategically, the battle and subsequent campaigns altered regional dynamics. The Golden Horde, distracted and divided, could no longer project power effectively in southern Rus. Lithuania emerged as a dominant force, reshaping alliances, trade networks, and military calculations. Moscow and other neighboring principalities recognized a powerful new player, necessitating shifts in both diplomacy and defense. The careful blend of military efficiency, political acumen, and cultural integration allowed Lithuania not only to conquer but also to stabilize and expand in a sustainable manner, setting a precedent for governance and military strategy in Eastern Europe for years to come. By the time winter approached, the Grand Duchy had not only won a battlefield victory but had cemented control over a critical region. The defeat of the Tatar forces at Blue Waters became a turning point, demonstrating that strategy, technology, and disciplined execution could overcome traditional steppe dominance. Lithuanian forces returned to the fields, towns, and rivers of southern Rus not as invaders but as administrators and protectors, securing the fruits of their campaigns. The combination of tactical innovation, battlefield discipline, political negotiation, and cultural sensitivity ensured that the victory's impact endured far beyond the immediate conflict. In the centuries that followed, historians would look back on the Battle of Blue Waters as a decisive event that reshaped the course of Eastern European history, transforming Lithuania from a threatened northern duchy into a regional powerhouse with enduring influence over the lands that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea.